Welcome to Down in Bloomington, a conversational podcast about the musical history of Bloomington, Indiana. A couple of weeks ago, my friend John Hancuff reached out to me. He told me that Glen Hicks was interested in being a guest on the podcast. I'm really excited about today's conversation with Glen. Glen has been a part of some really cool bands in Bloomington. He was a member of Pitbulls on Crack, a member of Trailside Killers, and along with his brother John, a member of Niño. Currently, Glen is in a band called Griffy, which I really hope you check out. You can find Griffy's music on Bandcamp, and you can also find them on Spotify and Apple Music. Glen shared some of his recollections about Bloomington's music scene. He told us some cool stories about playing at Second Story, playing house shows. He told us some of the history of the various bands that he's been in, and he shared stories about touring, playing shows in Chicago. He even talks a little bit about touring in Europe. He was a great guy, a really fun guest, and a really good storyteller. So I hope you enjoy the conversation. But before we get into the conversation, I want to share some music with you. This is the song Fly by Niño. Enjoy. Hey, welcome.
Hi.
Glad you're here. Thanks for making time to do this.
Yeah, this is cool.
Yeah. Do you want, I got sparkling water.
That's cool.
Alright. My setup is really simple. We're just going to have to sit kind of side by side on the couch, but
that's cool.
That's the limitations of being a podcaster without a studio.
Here's some Griffy stuff.
Oh, sweet. Pre-pandemic, one of my bands opened for Griffy.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, like at the Root Cellar.
Oh, cool.
Like years ago. Yeah. It was
fun. Those shows were so random and weird.
Yeah.
You never knew what you were going to get.
I know. Yeah, we opened up for you guys one time, and we opened We didn't open for Eddie Flowers, but he played before a set before us.
Did you ever have any like really like knockout fantastic shows there?
We had one that was like packed.
See, we had the same thing.
Yeah, and then we've had like 4 that were like underattended.
Exactly. Yeah, but one night it was magical where we just like showed up and it was really, really, really packed and happening, and we were like, okay,
right.
and then they were really into our set. They were like singing along with still like our song. I'm like, what the fuck's going on here?
That's awesome. Yeah, no, it's I think, at least my experience, like local music now is like that though. Like, I don't know if there's just too much to do or too much, like...
There's too much.
Yeah.
It's all there's too much media, too much activities, and it coalesced on Saturday night at the Flaming Lips, though. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Was that not beautiful? Was that not just like a beautiful explosion of art and love and light and music and everything, friendship? There's so many wonderful people downtown.
Right, and part of it was reminiscent of street dances in a sense, like just
I think Wayne was completely like psyched by it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, this is the most kick-ass.
You kind of wish they'd shut down Kirkwood every month and do a free show.
Yeah.
I don't know. It'd be cool. Glenn, thanks for making time to be here. I honestly, you were like a dream get for this.
Oh, come on.
No, yeah. Like, there's a certain window of Bloomington music that in my head was like this ultra magical time in Bloomington, and El Niño was a part of that. Just that window of bands. It was like, where the hell did this come from, and how did this end up in Bloomington?
Yeah.
I don't know. Are you from Bloomington?
Not originally. My dad was a law professor here.
Okay.
And he, I was born in Brooklyn. He was working as a law, in a law firm there, and like quickly realized like that's not a family man type of job. So he really enjoyed teaching. Moved to Syracuse. My brother John was born there. We moved to a little town outside of Syracuse called Fayetteville. Yeah. Went through 4th grade there, and then my dad got a sabbatical to Indiana University to teach at the law school. He's from St. Louis and Detroit, so he's a Midwestern guy. My mom's from Queens, so she's a New Yorker. And
you're a New York kid.
But here's the thing. She had been to Indiana University in the 50s and 60s at Junior Achievement National Conventions.
Yeah.
She took the train from Grand Central Station to Bloomington and stayed at the Graham Hotel.
Oh my God.
I know. So I'd never known like she'd end up here. Like,
that's the only person I know of who's stayed at the Graham Hotel.
I know. It's so cool, man. Yeah. And, like, she stayed at Briscoe eventually. Anyway, moved here and in '77.
Wow.
I think it was like. We were supposed to be for a year, and then it turned into forever.
So, how old were you then?
I was 10.
Okay, so your like formative teenage years though were here in Bloomington. Yeah. Did you have music in your house? Was there?
Yeah, I took violin lessons from 3rd grade till 10th grade.
Right on. So it wasn't, your house had music.
Yeah, the first thing my dad ever like major privilege he ever gave me was how to use the turntable.
Oh, sweet.
And because he had a sweet stereo, he got like some proofreading gig where he got some extra money and they bought a cool stereo.
Right on.
And he'd bought a bunch of records, and he had Sgt. Pepper. We had a Bridge Over Troubled Water, a bunch of Kingston Trio. But he also had like concert for Bangladesh, and my brother and I just he let us put records on, and so that was kind of like music. they had classical records, he had jazz records, and we didn't care. We just would put it on. So it was always my brother and I was always listening to music.
Did you study the liner notes on all
Of course.
What's your earliest recollection of local music in Bloomington, of seeing local music or experiencing it?
Well, so I got a little too involved with the punk rock scene my sophomore year in high school, and my parents got concerned and offered me a chance to go to Indianapolis to go to school. So I did for a year to get away from all.
What school?
Cathedral.
Okay, I went to Chittard.
Oh, the Yard.
yeah.
But we I don't know. It was troubled teenage years. It was nice to get away. Like, sure, I'll get away from the house for a while. But after a year of that, I was like, all right. Yeah. Grass is always greener on the other side. Absolutely. Like, I want to go back to my family, my friends, and graduate from high school. Right. So during that year, though, my friends Eric Fournier, Andy Mayer, Dave Fortney, and Harry Brigand formed a band called the Blood Farmers. Mm-hmm. And in the fall of that year, I saw them at Ricky's Cantina and was absolutely blown away because I'd never seen. I saw some live concerts at the IU Auditorium and things like that, but never seen my friends, never seen like that kind of excitement like right away, like standing this close in front of me, like, oh my God, it was. That at Ricky's Cantina, I'd never even known this building existed. Right, that was the old like YMCA or something like that. It was next to across the street from where WFHB was. Right, so that was like mind blowing. Like, oh, right, I can do this. Yeah, So when did you and your brother start making music together? Well, I was, after I quit playing violin because that was cramping my rock and roll style, I started playing piano because my parents said, well, you have to keep playing an instrument. So I played piano for a couple years, but I didn't want to sit down. I wanted to be able to stand up, because rock and roll. Yeah. And they were like, no. And so I eventually stopped doing that, and I taught myself to play guitar. My brother got a bass for Christmas. Right. And so he and I started doing that. Yeah. And just sort of jamming. And then a friend of his loaned him a drum kit. And I blinked and he knew how to play drums. I think he was listening to a couple Beatles records and a Phil Collins record. And all of a sudden he was like a freaking great drummer. So that was fun. And then I had a buddy named Eric Greenebaum that was just like a beyond bass player, classically trained. Jazz mind, like I felt sorry for him having to play with my brother and me, but he would play along. I had a guitar and had taught myself a few chords, and that was probably our first time we played together. And then he went off to college. I went off to college, and where'd you go? I went to IU. Okay. And so my freshman year, for most of that year, my roommate and I only listened to the Beatles. Yeah. Like, that was it. We took the Beatles classes and only listened to the Beatles. Right. And we were crazy. And then my sophomore year, getting ready to start my sophomore year, my friend Eric Fournier from the Blood Farmers had moved back to Bloomington. He'd moved back to California after graduating high school. Yeah. And when he moved back, he was my best friend. From the first day I met him, I was just like, oh my God. We shared the same sense of humor and just like in all the best and wrong ways. It was absolutely wonderful, And he moved back and I think I ran into him and he said, hey, my aunt's running, she works for Union Board and I'm working security for the REM concert. It was the kickoff of the Life Serve pageant. Right. Oh my God! Yeah. And he was like, I'll put you on the list. And I think I went there. I saw him. I gave him a tab of acid. And we had a good time. Yeah. But after the show, of course, it was like my mind is blown because I think at that point I had heard "Fall on Me." I had heard "Can't Get There From Here." and maybe Radio Free Europe once.
Yeah.
But Bloomington didn't really have a if you didn't have cable radio, like a way to hear those songs.
Right.
I think I heard Can't Get There From Here on WTTS on an early morning kind of show.
Yeah.
It was just like, what is this? Oh my God.
Yeah.
And same with Fall on Me. It was like, this is such a beautiful song. Who is this? And then seeing them in concert changed. So anyway, Eric and I had a great evening that night, going back listening to, the next day he brought his entire record collection over to my room, which consisted of like Echo and the Bunnymen and New Order, The Cure, Hoodoo Gurus, like Circle Jerks, and like all this stuff that I missed because my junior year, when all those guys were like delving into punk rock, I was in Indianapolis like listening to Q95 and like album rock radio and going, okay,
that was similar to my experience. Yeah.
So then that just like changed everything.
I was wondering if early REM had some influence on El Niño, because I've always heard pieces of that in there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Michael Stipe and the band, like the way Stipe, his sort of impressionistic approach to lyrics, always spoke to me.
Yeah.
And still does.
For sure.
I think even with Griffy, I still tend, depending on the song, tend to use that kind of imagery related.
Yeah.
I
can see that. And there's a little bit of that jangle in there.
Sure.
Not the like total Birds end of the spectrum, but that that alt rock jangle. And I feel like that was a part of that like magical window of music in Bloomington, where there was a Bloomington sound, and there was an element of that in it, I think. And you all were definitely a big part of that sound. When did El Niño form?
Well, I had been living in San Francisco up until 92, and I moved back. I had moved out there originally to work as an actor. I'd been a part of a troupe here in Bloomington, and they moved out there, and literally the week after I moved out there, they were like, sorry, we're moving to L.A. I'm like,
all that effort to get
here
there.
I am, and I was living with my girlfriend, and so I tried to like get like acting gigs and
right.
So I kind of reverted back to my guitar because I quit the Trailside Killers to move out there, so I was like playing guitar, writing songs, and like trying to like look in the want ads for guys to form a band with and do something. I don't know, and nothing, man. And even if I did find somebody, it was like really hard to find a place to practice.
Yeah.
Because it's like everybody's living on top of each other there.
Hell yeah.
Bang, 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 shut up.
Yep. So you moved back.
So here. My brother was like, dude, just move back to Bloomington and we'll start a band.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, because he dropped out of college and was living in Bloomington. And
is he younger than you or older?
Yeah, he's like 2.5 years younger.
Okay.
So I did, and he had already been playing with two guys, a guy named Robert Walker and Paul Burke,
right?
Who had been playing with Phil Trakoff.
Okay, yep.
In the Virginia Scrapings.
Right.
They were his rhythm section. So my brother was playing guitar with them and had been like already they had like had a repertoire and everything, So I just like kind of walked into that. Right. I would get off of work at the Uptown and I'd work in the morning, so I'd get off around noon. And
how many people in the local music scene from the '90s do you think worked at the Uptown Cafes?
I think it was a prerequisite.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was '92, but then that kind of morphed. It wasn't really working. The what I was used to as far as like wasn't really happening, and my brother felt it too. And my buddy Dan Fierst approached me and said, "You know what you guys need?" And we were like, "What?" And he was like, "Me." and he's amazing drummer, and we went up. Okay, and so had the hard task of saying sorry, Paul.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, Paul and those guys are best friends.
Yeah.
So it was a package deal. So when we lost Paul, we lost Robert too.
Yeah.
So that left me on guitar, because at that point I was playing guitar.
Right.
And John on guitar, and Dan on drums, and looking for a bass player. We found one for about a minute, and then he went on vacation. And Dan's brother had some studio time at the Mac.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Where's your bass player?" And he's on vacation. All right, well, let's go record these songs anyway.
Yeah.
And so we did, and my brother just laid it out. He was like, Glenn, I hate the way you play guitar. You should just play bass. Straight up.
That's kind of how I ended up a bass player, too. Yeah.
Like, undeterred, I still play guitar.
Yeah.
But, so I picked up the bass and began a lifelong love affair with the instrument.
Yeah. Mike Watt says that most bass players are frustrated guitar players.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I like the bass because it's easy to get in a band.
Everybody needs a bass player. Exactly.
Yeah. So the Trailside Killers, though, so that I didn't move here until, I don't know, 91 probably. So I kind of missed that window, but the Trailside Killers have a lot of crossover with a lot of other bands in Bloomington. Is that correct?
Yeah. So right at the end of my sophomore year, after hanging out and doing that intensive music listen with Eric from Yay, our buddy and Eric's former bandmate from the Blood Farmers contacted me and said, "Hey, I'm starting a band, and I think you would be a good singer for it." Yeah. And it was with Dave Fortney, Blood Farmers bassist, Al Jarvis on drums, and Greg Phillips on guitar.
Right.
And so I said, "Okay, yeah." I mean, I've just been listening to I'm ready to be in a band at this point.
Absolutely.
So we started what became the Pitbulls on Crack, and then the Pitbulls on Crack broke up or splintered. It was kind of disintegrated and turned into the Trailside Killers, which was original. The reason the Pitbulls broke up was Al Jarvis moved to California, and I was like, can't have the Pitbulls on Crack without Al Jarvis, But as I had mentioned earlier, my brother John was a brilliant drummer, and at that point, Ross Danielson moved back to Bloomington from Austin, and he and Greg introduced me to him, and we played surf music together. I played for the first time.
I'm glad you brought that up, and I don't want to take away from the story.
No.
But how did Bloomington become a surf music?
I don't know. I really don't. I think maybe there was a band called the Rosebloods, and before that, there was I think the Rosebloods were kind of one of the first sort of early surf influenced bands, but Frankie Camaro really kind of pioneered that, and with Moto X. Right.
It's weird, right? That Bloomington, Indiana.
It is totally weird. It's always been kind of a head scratcher to me, but it's always thrived here. You know, I was a part of the Alcoholics, and that's because in the Trailside Killers we had so much fun playing surf music. I wasn't playing bass. I was playing rhythm guitar, third rhythm guitar, second rhythm guitar,
which every surf band should have.
Sure. So that was but and my brother played drums. Yeah. And then we had a weird incident where Kent Berglund, the bass player in Trailside Killers, and I were we were riding around on acid, waiting to go practice later in the evening. And we get back to the house, at the time, designated time, and there's blood all over the sidewalk. What's going on? And is this what we're seeing? Right. Is this really?
Is this real?
Is this blood? Or, I'm touching it. Yes. Okay, that's blood. And there's a trail. And we're like, let's follow the trail of blood. This is getting good. And we go back, and there's a window into the living room that's broken, and there's blood all over the window. And so we're like, fuck, you know, you go inside, we're like, what's going on? Don't really know, have any clue. Bandsaw shows up, no John, my brother.
Oh.
So we're kind of like setting up, tuning and stuff, and we at this, you know, this is pre-cell phones. We didn't even know.
Right, and so you're just going on about your
we
business.
don't know what's going on. All of a sudden, my brother's not there. So turns out he tried to open the window, and the glass broke and cut him like vertically down his arm and like severed a tendon.
Oh my god!
And like he was like, you know, so that was all we knew. And he showed up and he couldn't play drums anymore because he couldn't
grip the sticks.
Yeah, exactly. So that's how he became a guitar player.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
You couldn't make that up.
No. And Fort Al had just moved back from California.
Right.
So it was like, hey, you want to be in the Trailside Killers?
Right.
And then...
Okay, now the Trailside Killers already had the name before you followed the trail?
No. We didn't know what the hell we were going to be called. But we all went out for a bike ride one day and were riding on the Griffy trails.
Yeah.
And that's how we came up with it.
That's
we
great.
just pissed ourselves laughing about how dumb it was, but it's like, why not?
Right.
And then it turns out there's a serial killer out in California that was the Trailside Killer, you know. But
and then Trailside Killers kind of splintered. And
that was then when I moved to San Francisco, they became Joyride.
Right.
And Kent Berglund left that band.
Okay, and then so for historic purposes, Joyride then evolved into Speed Luxury.
Yes, it did.
Right. Okay.
Yes, it was the same band.
Exact same lineup in that band.
So, yes.
You came back from California and started El Niño with your brother, and if I remember correctly, El Niño kind of got some attention and ended up with Paul Mahern producing, and you made a few records, right?
Yeah, we put a single out on Egg Records.
Right.
That was Paul's album or label, I think. We did a 3-song demo with him up at
September Studios, or was it
Sonic Iguana?
Sonic Iguana.
Yeah. In Mass. He was up in Lafayette, Mass.
I'll take your word for it.
It's an Italian last name, Gorigio or something. Anyway, those 3 songs, they kind of like, Paul kind of was like, oh wow, you guys are okay, you know, and we shopped those around, and we got a deal with Flat Earth Records,
right?
And then we made our first record with Paul, doing that, and just toured that for, you know, a couple years. Just me coming home from work, and I had a map on the wall with a 12-hour radius around it. We just book shows every night. Every come home, call clubs. Hey, you told me to call back tomorrow. You know, like, I'm calling back. You know, like all right, well, yeah. So I would book like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, sometimes Sunday shows. You know, weekend things, and we go do that. And we ended up playing a show in Chicago. Pardon me, opening for I can't remember the English band's name. This band, an English band, or it was just a regular show that we had already booked at the Elbow Room, and this English band got added to it at the last minute, and they came into our dressing room and said, "Right, we're on tour in the US, and we wondered if we could bump you, and you guys open for us." And we just laughed them out of the room because we'd been playing all summer, opening for everyone. We finally had like the middle slot for that show, and we were like, no, you guys are playing first.
Right.
So they got all pissed drunk and like real English and honorary. Came out on stage and goes, "What English and you're not?" And he threw a bottle at the crowd.
Oh no!
And everybody just left.
Yeah.
And so they played to nobody and just were snotty little British twats, you know, and and we were just like, whatever. Then we came out and we were like, woo, all right, El Niño. And like, We played.
Was there a crowd back in the room?
Yeah, because people didn't leave the room. Yeah. They just kind of went over to the bar and just kind of was like not interested in the band that was just being all pompous, you know. And so then we played, and the band shows up, and we get off stage, and turns out the manager of that band was there. And the manager was also the boss of their record label, and it was Marcus Russell, who was the manager of Oasis.
Right, yeah.
I loved your show. I would like to buy 2 of your records. And I said, oh, okay. And he gave me a lot of money for 2 records, more than... Like, wow, and that was that. We, here, and I think that night we went around. I think there was an MTV thing going on in Chicago, and we thought that our biggest achievement that night was putting one of our CDs in the frame. Yeah, in the door handle of one of the buses. Right. Yes, we're gonna make it now. So we played some show up in Minneapolis where our drummer Paul Carafo, cause at some point we switched drummers. Yeah. And I had a falling out up in Minneapolis. He wanted to leave at 2 a.m. and start driving back. And I'm like, dude, it's 32 below zero. Right. No. Yeah. We're leaving in the morning. Right. And anyway, it was a quiet ride back. And I was, my brother and I were just like... Yeah. And then literally I got a fax. A fax? Back in those, I had a fax machine because, you had to. And there was a fax from Marcus Russell saying, I'm really interested in working with your band and having you be signed to our label. Wow. I love your CD. Yeah. Please contact us. Wow. And so firing Paul became kind of like, all right, maybe we'll do this now. And so we did that. We pursued. We had already secured a really good management with Tony Margarita Management in Chicago. Matt Hickey was our manager. They managed like Wilco, and those guys, and so and for some crazy reason, I had this lawyer named Bill Barrow out in L.A. who managed Stevie Ray Vaughan's estate. Wow. And Scott Booker, from Hellfire Management, the Flaming Lips and all that. Yep. He introduced me to him. Actually, he didn't introduce me to him. He said, use this guy. And I said, okay. And I sent him this letter, and he was so just thought it was so hilarious that this nobody band with no finances and no resources at all was contacting him. Yeah. That he did it for pro bono. Really? And just so we had this manager, we had this lawyer. Yeah. And then Ignition sends their initial contract, and Bill just was like red pencil, red pen everywhere, like no. And they ended up like, where did you get this lawyer? Like, how did you get this guy? Yeah. And I still, to this day, don't really know how that all went down, but it's very cool that it was. Right, so, very cool. It was like a perfect coming together of all the right stuff. Like all these people kind of made this stuff happen, and I must interject that a lot of what was going on professionally for El Niño was heavily influenced by my work with Lisa Germano on 4AD Records. Right. I was touring with her in support of Geek the Girl and the Love Circus, and through that was meeting people and connections and networking. And Robin and Ivo at 4AD, and it was crazy. Yeah, so it wasn't all that weird, but that things should kind of come together, because there was a lot of I was doing a lot of work at that time, just like out there, but it was too stressful to try to be a freelance musician when Lisa's tours came to an end. And so I that was why I also wanted to try to focus on El Niño. Yeah. And not, so.
Well, but you all still had, even with all these shows that you were doing within the 12-hour radius of Bloomington, you all still played really regularly. in Bloomington, or at least it seemed
that way. Oh yeah, because that was just fun.
Yeah.
You know, we'd play once a month here in town.
Yeah. What was... Describe your impressions of that music scene, of that window of time with, you know, being part of those bands and you know, that group of musicians in Bloomington. What was that like for you?
Mike, it was so cool. It was so cool. I mean, we all felt pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that in all humility.
Right.
Okay? I think we all felt really good.
Yeah.
You know, I think we were hungry. Everyone was hungry.
Yeah.
What was happening in rock and roll at that time was, it seemed like anybody and everybody could get struck by lightning, you know, and it was exciting, and everyone was trying to do it their own way, and it was exciting, and we all supported each other.
Right.
You know, we went to these shows, and you know, it was hilarious. My buddy Greg, who was in Speed Luxury, was always he always loved El Niño. Mm-hmm. But some of the other guys in Speed Luxury were a little less hesitant to jump on the El Niño bandwagon. But their girlfriends weren't, and that always pissed them off.
That's hilarious. But that's the impression. Part of why I say that period of time was magical was because there was as a person in the audience, it seemed like there was a bunch of bands who played, but who were all pretty supportive of each other. Yeah. And who showed up for each other's shows. Yeah. And, you know, like later in the late 90s and the early 2000s, there was often that, like, you know, stand in the audience with your arms crossed and, like, kind of look down your nose at whoever's on stage. I don't remember that at all from that period of Bloomington's music. No,
it was exciting, and like people were pushing up to the front of the stage, man, and like it was an event. You know, I would always look forward to it. I would have you know, like my rituals of like, okay, I'm gonna go out to dinner, and I'm gonna do this and that, you know. Yeah. I lived in the Gentry building, so going to second story, it was just a stroll down the street to go to the show.
And so, like, given that environment, though, like, was there a lot of cross-pollination of bands? Because that's the impression I had, was that, you know, you might be in this band, but you might play over here or do some project with somebody over here, or, like, this drummer would switch to that. That was the way that it seemed to me. And it almost felt like you didn't need to go looking outside of Bloomington for music back then, you know, because there were just great bands that were playing in Bloomington at that time. Yeah. When you were backing up Lisa Germano or playing along with that, did that take you all over the country, or was that local or regional? That took me all over the world. Yeah.
She took my first tour was all over the country in a bus. Yeah. John Strom was so upset with me that my first national tour was in a nice Prevost bus. It's like, screw you, man.
No van for you.
No van for you. Yeah. I did plenty of that with El Niño, but no. So and then followed that up with a European winter tour, and then a European summer tour.
Wow, what was that like?
Unbelievable. You know, it was like to be all of a sudden felt like a real musician, you know, like, oh my God, I'm being paid to do this, you know.
What was your per diem for that? You don't have to actually.
Well, I don't remember my daily per diem. It was, you know, it's usually something like $50 a day to like survive on. But you know, Lisa paid me very generously to do that. But the label pays her per diem. But you know, there's always like free beer, pretty much wherever you go. In Norway, the venue we played up there in this little tiny town for a festival. I think it was called Christensen, and the Court Festival with Supergrass. Right on. They were right down the hall from us. That's fun. And Morphine.
Oh yeah.
And Lisa was friends with that. I forget the main guy from, but we had dinner with them.
Yeah.
Salmon.
Yeah.
We had a lot of salmon.
Yeah.
You know, so it was just amazing. Yeah. You know, she took me all over the world.
To backtrack a little bit, what was the first gig that you played in a band in Bloomington? Who was the band and where was the gig?
I just recounted this to my son.
Really?
Because he's moving into the fraternity house across the street from where it is. It was 1987. It was the week before the national championship. We had just defeated UNLV.
Yeah.
And Bloomington was going crazy.
Yeah.
And the Pitbulls on Crack didn't have a name at that point. Right. I think we just agreed on calling ourselves Spum from down the street.
Yeah.
I think that first night. Or possibly the Honey Possums.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Either one is a great name.
Yeah. But we had piled all of our gear into Greg's dad's giant Brougham station wagon, which could hold a whole entire band and the members of the band.
Yeah.
And drove around town looking for a party to play at. And
we didn't even book anything.
No, we just stumbled across this party on 8th Street, and I went up to the door and knocked and asked if they would like to have a band.
Oh, and that's amazing.
They said, sure. And I said, well, we can just set up right here, but you're going to have to move your couches and stuff. And they just moved them all out to the front porch.
Oh, that's
amazing. And we set up the whole thing. Mm-hmm. They had a keg going. It was like, woo. Yeah. And we just rocked out.
That's a great story. Did you end up playing a lot of house shows?
Yeah, so once we discovered that worked, that kind of became like...
Oh, really?
Let's go pack up the Brougham and see what we can find tonight.
Oh,
and we
awesome.
We did that like maybe 3 or 4, and then we kind of... That was how we Pitbulls on Crack kind of became... you know, people started hearing about us doing that, and like, wow, this band, they rock, you know, and so I was only 19.
Wow.
So when we finally got a gig at Second Story. David Miller was the manager of the club at the time. And
when was that?
87.
Okay.
That was 87.
Yeah.
So I had to sit in the back room before the show, and then as soon as I played, I had to leave. You gotta leave.
That would be frustrating. So I want to fast forward. El Niño. So when I track what's going on with your music, I know El Niño and then I know Griffy. Was there something in between?
Not really. I mean, so when we're talking about the end of the 90s, early 2000s, and the people standing around with their arms crossed, that was kind of the end of El Niño. Yeah. And but that was also when we were had just recorded our second record. Right. Which has never been released.
It's available on Musical Family Tree.
Yes,
though, right?
It is.
Yeah.
And
which I think people should check out.
Thank you. There's a record label in town called Rewind Records, and they're going to put it out. You're hearing it first. And they approached me out of the blue. I had been completely resigned to nobody hearing this. Yeah. Really outside of people that were specifically interested in it. Yeah. You know, when that came out, our manager had quit on us. In England. And I didn't have a manager. We were trying to get them to approve us going into the studio, and my brother and I wrote 40 songs. Yeah. And they finally were like, okay, you know, but it was almost a year of just writing and writing. And so we finally went in to recorded this with Keith Cleversley up at his studio in Chicago, and then mixed it. Nigel Godrich mixed it. He had mixed our first record when we had gotten signed. Once they reissued our Flat Earth record,
So Ignition. So you signed to Ignition, and then they
remember they bought our CD,
which
was the Flat Earth thing.
Okay.
They were like, we love this.
Yeah.
And when they signed us, they got the rights to those masters, and they had Nigel remix it.
Yeah.
So that record's called Galaxy Class.
Right. Is that also available on Musical Family Tree? That
one's on Musical Family Tree. Right. The Flat Earth record, I don't think is.
Okay.
So for like 2 years, we didn't have a manager. We tried to get a manager, and then they didn't want to release it in the United States until we had licensing. Until they saw how we did in England, and they didn't want to release it in England until we were licensed in the United States.
So so they kind of put you in a double bind.
So it just went back and forth for 2 years, and then they sent me an email one morning saying, we're dropping you from our roster, and you have the rights to this record. Oh. So that was cool.
Yeah. I mean...
And that was the
not
end.
that it's great that they dropped you from the roster, but that seems unusual.
It was pretty... Well, I think they were done with dealing with us, you know, so... Because I was trying to, be like, hey... What are we doing? Come on, you know, for 2 years, and it was lame.
Yeah.
So I quit playing music. I quit listening to music. It was pissing me off,
right?
And I hated that, you know. So I went back to college. I finished my degree.
Yeah.
Became a dad.
Yeah.
And then, like literally a month before I graduated, Musical Family Tree had contacted me and asked me if I wanted to do a show.
Yeah.
And play some songs, and so I said okay. And I talked to Dan Fierce. I needed a place to practice, and he must have looked at my, you know, seen the look in my eyes of desperation, and was like, "I got a place for you." I had to waterproof it.
Yeah.
But once I did, I moved in. It was all cool. And my first night, I was there to practice. Yeah. He showed up with his drums, and he was like, "Oh, hi. I was just moving these over. What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm getting ready to play." And so he joined me, and we started. I played the show solo, but he and I continued to meet once a week,
right
there, and then across the alley, and then finally out at his barn on the county line every week for about 8 years.
Wow. Just
the two of us playing until Ross moved back.
Yeah.
But I would play guitar, and we would just improvise songs and play covers and just play. It was just for ourselves.
So then that 8 years of like just kind of jamming turned into Griffy?
No, then it turned into the Alcoholics.
Okay.
Because Ross was like, hey, there's a rhythm section. I can play surf, you know, and then Greg got involved, and then he didn't want to do it, and Ian got involved, and I moved away, and Zach played in there. Anyway, when I moved back, because I situation moved, I ended up moving to Vermont and New Hampshire for 9 months.
What part of Vermont and New Hampshire?
Hanover.
Okay.
White River Junction, Vermont. Right
on. I lived in upstate New York and then in New Hampshire, so you know, Vermont's
I love that part of it.
Yeah.
But I didn't love being away from my children.
Sure.
You know, so when I moved back, I got this job working with the Media Digitization and Preservation Initiative.
Right.
And through that I met Dan Figarelli, who was one of the audio technicians for that program.
Right.
And he and I hit it off, and I said, hey, I know the drummer. And we just kind of turned into Griffy.
Yeah. So you started... You've written songs and recorded records. What's the lifespan of Griffy right now? And it's weird because there's that pandemic in the middle of it.
Yeah. Our first record came out in like 2018.
Yeah.
I think that might be right. Let's see right here.
Yeah.
Probably copyright date on it. 2019.
Okay.
So, and then. That's called I Amplify, and then Saint Astronaut happened. We were just starting to write that when the pandemic hit. We had already written Saint Astronaut and a couple of the other songs, and kind of had to change tactics with how we wrote songs together.
Sure. where is Griffy playing now? Where can we go to see a Griffy
right
show?
Now we're probably we had a great show at the Orbit Room. I really enjoyed playing there. That was really fun. Hoping to play the Blockhouse a little later this summer.
Yep, good.
Yeah.
Good. Do you have a website or a place where people can find any of your music or all of your music?
I do have my Bandcamp page.
Okay, yeah. Just
stand by.
And I'll put it in the notes as well, but if you just speak it, we'll...
Yeah, so it's griffy.bandcamp.com.
Right on.
Yeah, and you can hear Saint Astronaut there, as well as I Amplify, as well as on Spotify and Apple Music.
All right. This has been really cool to talk to you, and like I said earlier, for me, this is quite a get to bring somebody from that golden era of Bloomington's music, but especially because you're still doing stuff, like there's something cool about that too, the number of folks who were part of that are still contributing to music in this town today.
Well, I think it just speaks to who we are, It's like I never stopped thinking about music or stopped thinking about writing music or ideas, expressing myself through music.
Right.
So.
Well, it's amazing, and as a podcast, this whole thing is kind of like a nostalgia project. But so yes, it's nostalgic, but I also hope it like kind of speaks to and reflects kind of that's still a thing happening in Bloomington now. And I don't know. I just appreciate being here.
Yeah, me too, man.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was great talking to you.
Thank you. It was great talking to you.
Yeah.
Is there anything else before we wrap?
I don't think so.
All right. And that was my conversation with Glen Hicks. What a great guy. What a great storyteller. I really enjoyed having him on the podcast. This podcast is available on Spotify. It's available on YouTube. You can also find it on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. If you enjoy what you've heard, will you please tell your friends? I would love for these stories to get shared with a broader audience. And if you know folks who are involved in Bloomington's music scene, who are willing to be a guest on the podcast, I really, truly hope that you will tell them about it and tell them how to get in touch with me. I really, really enjoy doing this. I enjoy the nostalgia of it, and it's been a whole lot of fun. I'm going to leave you with some more music from El Niño. This is off the aforementioned unreleased album that I guess is going to be coming out on Rewind Records. This is El Niño, and their song is Nothing to It. Thanks again. We'll see you soon.